call this meeting to order, and we'll begin with our roll call.
Absolutely. Committee Member Rangel.
Here.
Committee Member Rickard. Vice Chairperson Darris.
Here.
Chairperson Bourbeau.
Here.
Thank
Just
you.
wave, Rochelle. We'll know you're there.
There we go.
Thumbs up. Okay, so like as I said, we'll adjust the minutes to record when Jerry Seebach joins us. Our first item is the consent calendar, which consists of the minutes of last week's meeting. Does anybody have any comments or adjustments to the minutes, or do I have a motion for their approval?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, so we have no amendments or any adjustments, so we have a motion and a second. Can you go ahead and call the roll?
Certainly. Committee Member Rangel.
Yes.
Committee Member Rickard.
Yes.
Vice Chair Darris.
Yes.
Chairperson Bourbeau.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is public comment. As we indicated, we did not have any members of the public online. Has that changed?
That has not changed.
Okay, so then we will skip public comment and we will jump into our business, which is review of capital projects. So I will turn it over to Jerry, I guess, to start.
Yes, thank you. And Cindy is so gracious to put up the worksheet so that we can run that kind of as a tag team here. So really excited to bring this to you today. So this is the second out of the 6 series of Finance Committee meetings that we'll be reviewing the budget. So it'll be comprehensive review by the time we're done with the 6th session, right before it goes to the full council on June 8th for consideration. So today's focus is on capital projects. So this is primarily section G of the budget, and it also includes section F of the budget, which is the capital projects that are related to the sales tax measure F14. So we'll kind of go through kind of the overview in the beginning, and then we'll get into the specific funds and projects after that. And as you said, Director DeBar is here on the call, so he can answer any questions specific to the capital projects themselves. So the first page that you have on your worksheet or on the packet that we have is a narrative. So this just goes through and really kind of describes what all of the projects are that are included in our next 5-year term. So this is a 2-year budget, but we do look 5 years out for our capital improvement program, and everything that's on this list here is in our 5-year program. You'll notice that the items that are italicized are in years 3, 4, and 5. So they're not included in the current budget for consideration this time, but they will be kind of slotted for future budgets. So we like to make sure that we have kind of a focus
Jerry, on that comment, when you say italicized, that's just the slightly slanted script. Is that beginning on G3 with Apple Valley Maintenance District?
That is correct.
Okay, gotcha.
So we have these broken out into different categories. So category A is road improvement projects. Category B is road rehabilitation projects. C is measure F14 projects. D, bridge projects. E, drainage. We skipped a couple here. We'll come back to those at later meetings. So we go right to G for parks projects and I for other projects. So part of the page numbers and the sections are missing a few things because we do have wastewater that we normally include in here. We'll bring that to you at a separate meeting, and some other projects that are kind of missing out of a couple of these pockets. So we will follow up with those. So that's kind of a general overall description of each of the projects. On the next page is the what we call the 2-year matrix. So it takes all of the projects that we have for your consideration in this 2-year budget cycle and breaks it down by funding source. So you'll see the projects listed along the left-hand column in the project title. And then you'll see the different columns for the Fund 101, which is the sales tax measure F14, Fund 281, which is an impact fee for circulation, Fund 282, which is the impact fee for the drainage, Fund 265, which is the local
Can
transportation.
you tell me what page? Maybe you've fallen.
Sure. Cindy, are you able to bring this up on the
G12, it looks like.
Yeah, G12.
Okay.
Cindy, you're mute. Can you?
Okay.
Are you able to bring it up, Cindy?
She's still muted.
Amanda, you may have to unmute and allow her to share her screen.
So while they're working on that, I'll go ahead and continue. So
Well,
G12.
go ahead, proceed, Jerry.
Okay, thank you. So each of these is kind of detailed as to where the funding source comes from for this next 2-year cycle. Some of these we would need a ton of columns. So some of them have a little letter notated by them, as you'll see in the other funds, all the way at the column second to the right. There's little letters there. And if you look on page G14, few pages down, you'll see what those are referenced to. So for example,
When you say they might need a ton of columns, is that?
If we
then they only
had,
have one letter by them.
right. So if each funding source had a column, this page would need to be much wider. So,
Oh, I see. Okay. That's okay.
yeah, so they're kind of notated down at the bottom there. Oh, great. We're able to share our screen. There we are.
Ah, very good.
So Cindy, if you can scroll down just a little bit, or Amanda, whoever's driving this one, and one more page down. So there are the notations there that A through I on the different funding sources. So this is everything in the 2-year. So this corresponds also with, as we keep going on the next page, G17. This is the 5-year capital improvement program, or CIP for short. So it lists each of the 5 years, the 2 years in this cycle, and then the 3 forward-looking years, and then the total all the way to the right. So the same categories, A, B, C, D, as we go down, the same projects, but these are categorized by fiscal year totals. So we will go through each of the individual projects as we move forward into the funds.
So make sure I understand though, when we back on pages like starting on G12, where you list the project and the cost and you list a source of funds, that isn't specifying the year. So you're saying the year
Correct.
gets listed starting down on 17 then?
Right. So the one year, this 2-year capital and project summary, as in G12. So if we go up a little tiny bit more. So this one here is that budgeted column right there that's bolded is the 2-year total.
Okay.
So that 2-year total is the same as your capital improvement program proposed 21-22 and 22-23 budget. So it's just broken out in a couple of different ways. So you could see 1, the funding source, and 2, the fiscal year amount. So it gives a little bit more detail. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay. So if we continue down a little bit past the CIP, we will get to our first fund. So this is the Capital Projects Fund. This is typically one that we kind of use for just special funding. Sometimes if we have a grant, we can use these funds for matches. Probably, I think right before the Great Recession, the general fund had contributed some funds to these. So there is funding in this project that is sourced from general fund. So it's able to be used for different types of matches. So this is a good resource for those types of things, or other just smaller projects that don't really have a another specific fund that they need to reside in. So this is the fund analysis. You can see we have a couple $100,000 in there, which is available, as I say, for opportunities that come up for us. If we scroll down a little bit, we'll see it's just interest that's coming into this fund. There's no other funding source for right now. In prior years, we did get a grant from HCD to fund some park equipment. So that was back in fiscal year 19, but currently it's just interest.
I guess I'm a little confused. Capital, I mean, the first fund on C15 and then D27, it's called Capital Projects Fund. It's a relatively small amount of money.
Right. So it's kind of a catch-all fund. So we have other funds like the Local Transportation Fund that houses a lot of projects. But if projects aren't really funded by the Local Transportation Fund, or they're not funded by impact fees, or they're not funded by something else, they can kind of be in this category. And then if we need, like the HCD, if we get like a grant that has a small match to it, we can use these funds for that project for the match.
The source of these funds was mostly grants, revenues from other agencies, it says?
The bulk of what's in the fund balance was general fund money that was contributed toward the capital project fund back in like 2007, 8, 9, somewhere in there.
Okay.
There's also some old impact fees, general impact fees. It's a hodgepodge of small amounts. Grants, usually you have to give it back if you haven't spent it, but it's just a hodgepodge of little things. But the majority of that was council had contributed some larger amounts to it to put away for roads.
And this available balance, is it restricted in terms of its use because of the source of the revenues, especially any of those coming from other agencies?
A portion of it may be restricted in its use. I don't think there's much that came from other agencies. Whoops.
Right. I want to say is probably in the range of 250 to 300,000 that is sourced out of the general fund and related expense interest.
And the rest is.
I'm just trying to determine in my mind whether this is a fund that will be ongoing, or is this something that was, created at a point in time for a reason, and when we spend the money, we'll kind of be done with it, or is this something that we need to keep in play that we will use periodically for, to accommodate certain things?
We do use it periodically to accommodate certain things. It doesn't have a regular funding source.
Okay. All righty. And I want to welcome Jerry Seebach, our treasurer, to the meeting. And Amanda, you'll note Jerry came in about a minute ago, if you will, in the minutes. So Jerry, welcome. And Jerry Rangel is proceeding, and we are currently on about page G,
I think we're almost ready, but I can't hear anything yet.
Okay. Oh, never mind that speech I just gave. So since Jerry can hear.
Select a speaker.
Miss, I'll go ahead, Jerry and Rangel. And we'll try to figure out when Jerry can hear us, and we'll clue him in on where we're at, although he can probably see it on the screen, hopefully.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think we've got it. I apologize that I should have come an hour early instead of a half an hour early.
Wow.
Can you hear us though, Jerry?
Yes, I can. Well, I can
Okay.
hear Charles.
Okay, great. Then we're going to let Jerry Rangel go back to explaining what page, she can let you know what page we're on.
We were just reviewing the
And,
capital.
and can you see the
project.
screen? Can you see the?
Yes.
Perfect. We were just reviewing the capital project fund. Is that something I should go over again, or should we move forward from here?
So the key things I'm sorry, I'm looking at 2018-19 actual, not really of great interest to us, but is that to say we've not expended any money out of this particular fund since 18?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
And I'm going to say, I mean, sorry, Mark and Jerry in particular, but of course, Rochelle is a member as well. There's no member of the public present at this point in time. So just interrupt Jerry with questions if you have them that, you know. Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead and move on to the local transportation fund. It's on page C18. So this fund actually has quite a lot of activity. We are working on the 2 bridge replacements, Via Avenue and Santa Lucia Avenue bridges. Those are funded with HBRR federal grant money. So the Santa Lucia is funded 100% with grant funds, and Via Avenue is funded 88.5%, or it's some round number. So the bulk of it is grant funded, but a small portion of it is funded with local transportation funds. So you'll see in this snapshot of the fund analysis, the budgeted number for 2021 in revenues was 6.2 from revenues from other agencies, which include the assumptions that we were going to be able to get a lot farther in our bridge construction process than we were able to with all of the hoops and everything that we had to jump through to kind of move those projects along. You'll see a corresponding 7.8 million in capital outlay. And again, a large portion of those 2 items included a significant dollar amount for those 2 bridges. So you'll see an actual, or in the 2021 estimated, the revenue and expense is much lower for this year. So if we want to go ahead and move to the next page, this is page.
I could just ask a question, and it's just so I start to
Certainly.
understand the lingo here. Capital outlay, that's money that was spent on projects that were done. Is that?
Yes,
That means,
exactly.
Okay. All right.
So the next page, D28, is the revenue that comes in. So you'll see those top 2 lines right there that say TDA non-transit. Those are kind of your recurring revenue that we get. So LTF can be used for streets. So we determine what needs to be used for transit, and then the rest gets to be used for streets projects like we have here. So those 2 items are your recurring projects here. The rest of them are grant funds and things like that that become available. So those the HBRR grants for the Via Avenue and the Santa Lucia bridges, you'll see they're kind of bigger numbers. Again, those are revenues coming in for grants to pay for those 2 bridge projects. There's some USHA money that's available from SLOCOG that we're using for the Trafficway Ardea Avenue and the San Gabriel Road rehab. So we'll get to use some of that grant funding this year as well.
Jerry,
yes.
in terms of the recurring revenue, especially non-transit bike path, ranging, basically 25 to 35,000 or so. I assume that is restricted then for those, maybe this
Right.
is a Nick question, restricted for that purpose. And what have we been, or what are we planning to spend that money on?
Nick, did you want to hop in or you want me to go?
Oh, you can go ahead. I can fill in the blanks if there's any that I see.
Okay. I'm trying to remember the exact projects. I know we've used some, I think there was something down Morrow Road for bike path and some other projects that included kind of bike path delineation and things like that, that we were able to use some of those funds for.
Yeah, a lot of times, Charles, there's like, we're adding a bike path or widening a road or something like that, that we can use some of this money on, but it's constrained, a certain percentage is constrained from that TDA that needs to be spent on bicycle related facilities.
And are we, spending that much money a year roughly, or are we saving it up and going, we're getting, let's say 30,000 a year on average, and, but then we're saving it up and, spending 60, 90, 100,000 at a whack when we have something come along, or
Yeah,
how we do it?
that's
Okay,
how we
got it.
kind of do. We save it up, get enough money. It's kind of like some of these bigger CDBG projects. You need a couple of years to save up and then get fund balance built up to do some work.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
And we actually have to track that money separately from the other. So that and interest, there's a balance in there. So.
Right, and I would assume that, when on the revenue side, when we talk about the bridge money, there was a delay of a year on one of the bridge fundings, right? And so, our budgeted amounts are based upon our latest information. And is the revenue received essentially, you actually received ahead of time, or do you get a point where they're saying, well, you're now funded, but you got to spend the money and request reimbursement?
It's that second one. So we spend the money, we request reimbursement, and then we receive the money.
And if we were super cash poor, how would you do that?
Would be complicated.
How would you spend $3 million if you didn't have it in order to turn around and request reimbursement of $3 million?
I haven't looked into it on this grant, but on some grants, you're able to request kind of some front money.
Advances, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we prefer not to do that. And that cash issue isn't an issue for us. So
If they're big enough projects, people actually do grant anticipation notes. You go to a bank and borrow and then pay the bank back when you get the reimbursement, but it's got to be in mid-millions
When I was
to make that
a grants
worthwhile.
officer, yeah, when I was technically speaking a grants officer with the Guard, we would advance the state money for certain things, but they had to go through a request process and everything. Okay.
Just a quick question, Charles. So on these like the HBR grants, that was at the fourth one down or something, 138,178, and then it jumped up to 3 million and down to 78. How are these numbers determined? Where?
So it's based on Public Works evaluation of what components of the projects will be encompassed in the next period. So Public Works has kind of looked at that project, projected out the costs for the next 2 years, and then we kind of plug in the budget numbers based on that. So both revenue and expense numbers. So we'll see matching expense numbers or corresponding expense numbers for this, and assuming that we're getting the revenue from the grant on that. But it's based on Nick's evaluation and his team on how far we'll get, what pieces of the project, how much those are going to cost in the next 2 years. Nick, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think, Mark, like if you look at, the Via Avenue Bridge and then the San Lucia Bridge, you can see in the 2021 budgeted, it's 3.1 million and 1.7 million. Then projected is 78,000 and 170,000. We thought that we would be getting the funding from that grant coming in this year so we could start construction, but it was, it's all been delayed because there's just not enough money being replenished into that grant program.
Okay.
So we're in a holding pattern now for doing that. So we didn't spend that amount of money, but you can see in the outlier years, we're still like hopeful that we can somehow get a work or get the okay to move ahead with those projects, because both of those projects are shovel ready. We have the right of way. We have everything ready to go other than the funding from the feds.
And the smaller amounts are assumed for design, land acquisition, that sort of stuff. And it's just the big amount is getting pushed forward to the subsequent years because we didn't get it on time. Right?
Correct.
Okay. Alrighty.
One quick thing too, I just want to mention USHA grants are divided among all the cities by right. So there's a formula for that. And then we pick the roads. RSHA grants are regional and they're competitive, so we compete against other jurisdictions.
And is that formula based on population or is it more complex than that? And, you know, and therefore probably a little more fair or unfair?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's primarily based on population.
It is. Yeah, it's population based.
And the
And then
RS,
RSHA, you go to battle with the other cities at TTAC and SLOCOG meetings. I'm just kidding.
okay, got it. Thank you. Any other questions? So Jerry can proceed.
The last piece on page D29 just shows the SB1 funds. So if you'll recall, gosh, I don't know how long ago it's been, a couple of years back, we started getting this Senate Bill 1 funding for roads, and we have to prove that we are keeping up our own funding. It's not replacing our existing funding, but we're expecting this to be kind of start at, I think it was 500,000 or 600,000 a year and grow from there. It hasn't been quite as lucrative as we thought it was, so that the amounts per year that we're getting are a little bit smaller, and that's really due to the economy and now COVID and everything, but we are seeing growth in that back up. These amounts are a little bit confusing, I think, when you look. These are not annual amounts that we're receiving. So the SB1 revenue goes into the gas tax fund, which is the fund that we use for the streets department. We will look at that at a future meeting. But we have the project for that. So the projects that we have scheduled for SB1 funding are the El Camino North rehab, which we've completed in 1819. And you'll see that's that 599,242. So when we spend the money in that, then we transfer money from the gas tax, the SB1 money from the gas tax fund into this fund as a revenue source for this fund to compensate for the expense in that fund. So this current year budgeted, we expected to spend $1 million in El Camino South in SB1 money. That project came in a little bit more expensive because of some information we found out during kind of the design process and the research for that. So we're pushing that out a little bit. So we'll spend a little bit in the current year for design, and then the bulk of that project will be done in 21, 22. We're actually kind of pre-spending some of our SB1 money. So the following 22, 23 year, we'll be able to use some of that year's SB1 money toward the El Camino South project. And that is authorized for us to be able to kind of pre-spend those funds on projects. And then those will be the first two projects. And then the third project that will be using SB1 funds will be the Traffic Way North. So we'll just be getting started with that in fiscal year 22-23 with 150,000 in design costs and preliminary starting. So we'll see the revenue come in for SB1 on Fund 260, the gas tax fund for streets. But this is the transfer from that fund into this fund to cover the costs that are occurring in that fiscal year. Any questions on that?
So that would explain why there's no transfers in 20, because essentially it isn't that we didn't receive any SB1 revenue. That revenue is recorded elsewhere. We just didn't transfer it to this expenditure. Okay.
Right. Perfect. Okay. So the next page is G22. So this is the expense piece of the local transportation funds. So we have a few here at the top in what we call special projects. So these are kind of smaller things. They're kind of ongoing maintenance. They're not the bigger projects that you can really say this project either extensively or extended the life of the asset, or really, you know, was more than a maintenance type of project. Or this also covers like studies or evaluations. So the pavement preservation program at the top there, that's $30,000 for kind of ongoing fixing cracks and doing kind of that preservation thing that prevents the roads from getting so damaged that they're going to be more expensive to fix. So that's just a small amount to kind of help maintain them. The $50,000 is the citywide pavement condition evaluation. So if you'll recall, we use the Street Saver program to evaluate or to assess our streets. It lists all of our streets as an inventory of all of the conditions and everything. And we use the critical point management with that system to determine what the next roads that we need to do work on are, so that prevents those roads falling into the next highest expense category. So we're maximizing our funds that way. So we like to do this evaluation every 4 years to keep our inventory updated. So that would be that item. Down
on that item though, Jerry?
Yes.
Well, or Nick, I thought we did it every 5.
Yeah, so
If it's every 4 years, does that mean we did it last in 18, 19?
yes,
And
we did in 2019 was the last time we did it. And talking with Jerry, what we want to do is, so we have this 2-year budget cycle. So we want to have kind of the most current condition of the roads when we're choosing those roads through critical point management. So if we can do that evaluation and update the road conditions every other budget cycle,
Okay.
then we
And
can
is,
use that information to pick the roads that most need it.
Right. So does that say that, looking at this sheet, that in 18-19 we spent 38,700 for it? What are the smaller amounts? If we only do it every 4 years, what are the smaller amounts, you know, in the subsequent years, the 4,000 and the 7,000s? What are those?
I think we had some, with the consulting contract with PEI, we had some training available for that. And then we also, you know, as we do projects, they'll update the Street Saver. But, you know, we're going to be trying to do that in-house more. And so we don't have to rely on them. But it's a pretty complicated program. So sometimes it's just playing catch up and getting those roads entered and the treatments that occurred over that year.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so we also have
ahead, Jerry.
$25,000 for bridge evaluation. So Nick, if you wanted to describe that a little bit more.
Yes, we were actually able to get those HBR grants for Via Bridge and Santa Lucia Bridge by doing some evaluations on those bridges and coming up with a little preliminary engineering study and then submitting that to, and you know, that's actually very lucrative funding. It pays, as Jerry mentioned earlier, I think it's like 88.53%. And then for Santa Lucia, that 11.47% remainder is made up in toll credits. So the city doesn't contribute any of that funding. It's covered by other funding sources. So this would be to kind of take a look at some of these bridges and you know, the ones that are getting older and to be able to do some of that work.
Did you
Talk
want to?
about
It's kind of like chasing grants. You know, it's like grant writing almost, except, you know, doing engineering to do grant writing.
Any commentary on the local roadway safety plan, since that's the next item? Because I'm kind of curious what that is.
Do you want me to, I can cover that. So this is it's a plan that we're looking at the highest priority, not only intersections, but segments of road to come up with some options for improvements, safety improvements for motorists, for pedestrians, for bicyclists. And we actually need to do this if we apply for Highway Safety Improvement Program grant. And those HSIP grants, again, it's a federal program. They require you to, they're going to start beginning next year. They're requiring us to have an approved LRSP, local roadway safety plan, adopted to be able to apply for any of those grants. So again, it's really looking at the worst places in town and then coming up with solutions to be able to fix them, or long-term plans, long-term or short-term.
Based on this cost, are we paying a consultant to do this report or something over a 2-year period? Because it's in 2 different budget years.
We are, yeah, W-Trans, we hired them through a competitive RFP process.
And in general, Jerry, these, you know, we're looking at the LTF, the Local Transportation Fund. These projects are, you know, not real big, these particular special projects, but we're just using LTF money for that. We're not having to throw in general fund money transferred into the LTF to pay for this or anything like that.
Correct.
Right.
They're
Okay.
eligible for LTF funding.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and sometimes these are good things to have, like that RSP. If we come up with an option for a roadway section, and all of a sudden that roadway comes up, you know, for redoing something or rehab or whatever, then we have a game plan to address that, you know, safety improvement.
By the way, the local roadway safety plan we received a grant for, so you saw some of the revenue on the previous page. So 72 out of the 85,000 was covered by grant.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you, Rochelle. I totally forgot.
Okay. I don't see it on the previous page, but that's good news.
It's the third one down on D28.
Okay, okay, two previous pages.
There's a small match on that, I think, so.
Okay, got it. Thank you. I pictured that there's consultants have a lobby that they lobby Congress whenever they enact these grant programs to require, you know, plans have to be written. You have to have a certified plan written by a certified planner that. Okay. Got it. So are we ready to move on to the last three? The first one, of course, I think is of great interest to probably all of council.
Yes, I would agree with that. So the Downtown Infrastructure Enhancement Plan. So this is $650,000 that's estimated for the construction plans to be kind of shovel ready to get ready into construction for the next phase. So we have been keeping our eye out for grants. We've been looking for them. We've put this as an item on several different options so far for grants, and we continue to look for options to get this funded. Without that, we're assuming that we are using local transportation funds, but hopefully we can get grant funding in there to backfill that. But this is an exciting project. It has been very high on the council priorities in the last several meetings and with the community as well. So we started kind of doing some investigation and kind of everything that we've done so far in this program or in this project, and you won't see it in this fund. We actually had it in a couple of funds coming up, the circulation impact fee. We were able to use $100,000 of that USHA grant funding from SLOCOG to pay for costs that we've used so far. So that's kind of separate. This one is the plans and specs for construction. Does that, anybody have any questions on that one?
Well, I'm curious, for the 650,000, are we hiring a separate, architect firm, or engineering firm to do it, or what are we actually buying with the 650,000?
Nick, did you want to hop in on that?
Sure. So we need to go out and we need to get topographic land surveying information. And then we would hire an engineering firm, qualified engineering firm through an RFP process. And then they would design it. And we need to maybe get some soil borings if need be, but probably not too many if we have to. And then, yeah, they prepare plans and specifications and put together cost estimates and basically have it, basically bid documents ready to issue an advertisement for bid and to solicit contractor proposals from.
Got it.
Is
Okay,
this,
thank you.
This is the anticipated pre-construction cost, the 650,000?
Yeah, the design and bid cost, the design and bid fees for the project.
Okay.
Yeah, construction we're estimating 5 to 6 million, just depending on, how much we do. Obviously we want to do this right and make sure it's successful once it's implemented.
As part of that, and then preparing bid documents, we have an estimated cost of 5 to 6 million as stated here. They will have options, I assume. Especially if, as they put it together, they come up with an estimate and say, no, this is going to be 8 or 9 or something like that. Will they have options like, okay, if you had to scale it down and shave off a block of it or something, are they going to, with the bidding documents, have those kind of options in them?
It can have some alternative bid schedules in there.
Okay.
What usually happens is, as we're working with the consultant, because they're reporting back to us and we're directing them, we usually try to do that value engineering during the design process before they get going too far and start putting everything together. So they usually give us a preliminary cost estimate. And if it comes back at 8 million, we're going to say, whoa, what's going on here, and try to dial it back as much as possible. Even if it comes in at 6 million, we might be saying, hey, is there some things we can do to make it even cheaper, and still accomplish the goal of the plan.
Thank you.
I just want to remind you too, and Nick, maybe you can correct me, doing sections of it may be difficult because the traffic flow's got to all flow together. So,
yeah.
But materials and stuff like that, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is the logical, if you were to do it in 2 sections, it would probably be north of Traffic Way and south of Traffic Way. That would be the logical split point that you could make a transition.
Yeah. I was thinking more along the lines of what Michelle is indicating. You might have to, you potentially have to trade off certain quality features or something like that sometimes. Of course, it also would depend on what kind of grant funding is available. If you find your way to an $8 million grant, you might be wanting to know what additive items you could have. On the federal side, when we would have, $20 million for a construction project, you say you got, they know how much money you got available, but you'd ask for it in terms of what can you cut and leave out and what can you add in,
And this estimate is for more of a federally funded program. So if we have somehow get local funds, that number will drop down.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so storm drain improvement projects. So as you know, I'm sure water is a big issue with roads. So anytime that we get an opportunity while we're doing a road project to enhance the storm drain system, near it, around it, under it, that is what we try to do as part of the project. Sometimes, as you know, we don't have a lot of funding for this. We don't have a reserve fund or anything. There's no identified funding source for drainage improvements or like maintenance and things like that. We do have the impact fees for expansion, but we don't have a big fund set aside for just kind of the general maintenance. So this is some money. It's not a ton, probably not near as much as Public Works wishes it was, but certainly some money to do some of those major issues or projects that really need to be done that can't be done with a road project or otherwise. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Nick, but just some additional funding for storm drains.
Yeah, it's you know, it's really to increase any culvert we replace. So there's a lot of rusted old metal culvert pipes, and in any pipe we replace it with is usually a corrugated polyethylene plastic pipe with a smooth wall. So we increase capacity, and a lot of our street projects, we evaluate the culverts on those projects and replace them as need be, even the F14, because what good is building a new road if it collapses a year or two later with a culvert pipe? But so much of pavement life is to make sure the water gets off the pavement and kind of deal with the water. So this is kind of not actually part of those projects. This would be specific to going and replacing a storm drainage pipe, or increasing capacity, or addressing some flooding issue.
So, two questions. One, are the $150,000 a year for each of the 2 budget years? So essentially, that's not for specific projects. That's just a figure of available funds to deal with those issues as they come up during the budget year. In other words, $150,000 to deal with storm drainage improvements.
It could be
Projects in the next fiscal year, not allocated to any specific project because you don't know what those projects are going to be, or what is that?
Yeah, so we'll identify some of the pipes that need to be repaired or fixed or upgraded, or drainage issues that need to be addressed, and we'll use that money towards those projects. But it could also be, you know, we have a storm event and it blows out a pipe, and we need to use, you know, perhaps some of this money to repair it, you know, increasing capacity and other things as well. But yeah, it's kind of more towards that level, you know, trying to identify those projects. But, you know, some of these projects can be put off a little bit too, but so many pipes are in town that
Right.
they're so far beyond their useful life that it's trying to chip away at those.
So these previous years with just the dashes, you know, no numbers, does that mean no repairs were done, no monies were expended on these types of issues?
We did use some of the impact fee funds for expansion of certain projects. So there is some in a fund that we'll get to in just a few minutes here. But this is using LTF funds. So we haven't been doing that in the last couple of years, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so this would be more, you know, replacing in kind sometimes, where the drainage facility fee funding is more increasing capacity or addressing drainage issues, like that Amapoa project that was done, you know, a few or 9 years ago, or whenever that was.
And I believe it, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I believe at your meeting last week, you discussed the asset inventory software that we were looking to purchase. And so drainage would be part of that as well. So that would give Public Works a better understanding of what the number and quality of drainage system improvements are needed, you know, how many are really critical. And so this is kind of a help until we get there. But once we get to that information, that'll be much more precise in numbers and information.
Okay. I'm glad that Mark noted the dashes, because, you know, that indicates obviously we've not used this kind of money before for this. Is this a significant change of policy and practice on our part? I mean, it sounds like a good idea. But, in other words, we haven't used this particular type of money for these type of things in the past? Or do you just have a dry
Correct.
spell?
We have used small amounts, but we have been using the impact fees. The impact fees aren't really designed for these replacements, and we're seeing a lot more failures than we have previously. I went years and years and years, and we never really had a failure, and then we had a whole bunch in a year. So this is our funding source for that, our only funding source for that, really.
Got it. Because the impact fees would in theory be for increased capacity based on development.
And even though we are increasing the capacity, the original project that was approved in 2006 was a smaller, hey, increase in capacity. But I think they were looking at, going from 6-inch to 12. We were fine. We're within the legal limits. I just feel like we pushed that boundary about as far as we can.
Right. And Nick, you think you alluded to it, but I wanted to make sure I understand in terms of F14, because when you're doing F14 major jobs, you're doing some drainage replacement stuff. Like I noted when you did Monterey Road right there at San Anselmo, you tore up old, bent, rusty, corrugated metal pipe and you plugged in, you put in new stuff. That's all part of, and utilizing the F14 money, I assume, for that, right?
Correct.
When you do a major, okay.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. All right. I think we might be ready to hear about the alleyway behind.
Terrific. So this is the alley that's just north of Traffic Way between US 101 and the businesses that are on El Camino Real right there. So this is.
And that alleyway is a public right-of-way, I understand, correct?
It is, and there has been a lot of discussion across all of our budget meetings and council meetings and everything about having, enhancing downtown and things like that, having more parking, having more access. So this would meet some of those needs. So there's been, I think, a time where there's a lot of cars parked there. There's not good signage. So it's the pavement's kind of damaged there. So this would enhance that whole alleyway. Nick, did you want to add anything to that as well?
Yeah, so it's next to Flum's Muffler right there. So it's that alleyway. And it kind of dead ends and there's parking on the left side. So it'd be taking care of the drive aisle there and then also doing the parking area up to the fence and then restriping that and doing some signage as well. So there's been some parking wars around that area. And there's been some, I guess, a lot of use of it by a certain muffler shop to not be named with a lot of the stalls as well. So with those other buildings that front El Camino, that are being redeveloped. And, I know the Zappases have a plan for that vacant lot there. So it's really trying to kind of support some of those businesses a little more instead of just having it an expansion of a auto repair place. It's been fine for them to use that because there hasn't been too much demand, but, with Colony Market across the street and some other businesses that are popping up, I think it'll be much more valuable. And then getting some wayfinding signage as well to let people know that is public parking back there.
I just pulled it up on Google Earth because I was curious. There's no specific outlet to that, right? So I can see you can go through a couple of parking lots to get back to El Camino, but otherwise
dead ends.
It appears to just dead end. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have to drive over the sidewalk and hop the vertical curb to get back to El Camino, I believe. But
now there is one way you can get out there. I forget whose parking lot it is, but it's the one next to where the Atascadero News has its office now. But it's kind of very unclear whether you should only be coming in that way or going out that way. it's not marked in any way, but it's not an over the curb thing.
I always thought that was private property for the business owners that were there.
But yeah, I mean, it's
Okay.
right. This project, this, when this goes contract, this would come to the whole, I mean, if we just put it in the budget, this is still something that needs to be approved by the council as a whole, or if we, when the budget gets approved on June 25th or whatever, is that just say, okay, go ahead, do the plans, come forward to the council with a contract ready to approve?
Yes. If it's in the budget, we're going ahead, we're working on it.
Yeah, and if it's under, what is it, 100,000, I can't remember now. It's changed. Sometimes it doesn't come to council.
Right.
It's more of a city manager award. So
Right.
There's 200 in there. I feel really comfortable with that number, but I believe it'll be something less than that.
I think the rest of the council is comfortable with, supporting these kind of improvements in the downtown area, but this is something that, I mean, I suppose somebody could say, oh, well, the property owners back there ought to do something or whatever, but it is a public right of way. It's not private property.
It is a public right of way. It is in really bad shape right now. It is a potential liability if we leave it at the shape that it's in.
And any of the neighboring property owners who are developed, who have any plans to develop, like Z Villages, I know Mr. Ravat, who owns the building, owns a couple of buildings there. He has some interest in doing different things there. What would typically be expected of them, because let's say they have a parking requirement they have to fulfill or something. Although this isn't a downtown area, I guess, so maybe there's not as much, but what, if any, expectation would there be for them to do certain improvements versus us doing them for them?
Yeah, so probably the most recent one that was done was Nexus, the old Scotty's barbecue area, George K's building that he did. So he needed to provide 2 or 3 parking stalls, and he provided those, but it was on his private property. So they can't provide it on the city right away or the city property. They still need to keep their dumpsters and keep their on site parking on their property. So it's usually on the right side of the drive aisle in that alleyway. And then the left side would be, general public use. We always get asked, hey, can we put our dumpster back there? And we say, no.
Well, I'm excited to see what kind of, I used to park back there when I go to Scotty's barbecue, or years ago, dropping the kids off at the Taekwondo studio or whatever that was above Whiskey and June's or so, whatever it was. Used to park back there a lot. Yeah, it's always been crappy condition. But anyway, yeah, I'm look forward to seeing what that looks like.
And it might be something, if we
Any
can.
other questions for Nick or Jerry on that?
No.
Let's go. Let's proceed.
You're on mute, Jerry.
Whoops, sorry about that. So we'll go ahead and proceed to G23, which is the second page. We're still on the local transportation funds.
Hey, Jerry, I think you missed a project at the very end on the previous page.
Oh, did I? What did I miss?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, that was 18 and 19. There's no dollars.
yeah.
Oh,
That's it,
sorry,
yeah.
my bad.
So, yeah.
We have a phase 2 one coming up, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. There'll always be an El Camino North and an El Camino South, right?
Exactly. So this is all of the kind of the meat of the road repairs that are not F14 funded. Nick, would you prefer to kind of give a brief update on each of these and kind of where we are on that?
Sure. Well, the first one's
to save time. I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know that to save time, I don't know that we need one. I mean, they kind of indicate, the place. And I would just say in a general category, are these these are non-F14, Jerry just said. So
Correct.
these are what we would call collector streets and arterials, or I mean, not collectors, these are arterials, major roadways. That
Yeah,
we're
so
funding with
they-
LTF money.
Yeah, so the F14, the city council has had a policy, even though they could spend it on arterials, to only have collectors and local streets as part of that eligibility for that funding. This is more spent on, this has always been the traditional street project funding. So a lot of times it's gone to arterials and collector streets. Again, you could spend it on local streets as well, but we try to get the busier, heavier use streets on with this money. Probably the one that maybe pops out there is the downtown district.
And I think that's,
Oh, go ahead.
well, and I think that's good because the council kind of committed that we would use F14 money on neighborhood and collector streets, not arterial and major ones, because said we would continue to use LTF money. We wouldn't just supplant LTF money. We would continue to use LTF for arterials. And so I think to save time, you don't need to explain each one of these. It's self-evident unless we have questions. And I only have one question, and that's the downtown district pavement rehabilitation.
So,
and 150,000 this coming year, but 1.5 million in 22-23. That's a pretty good chunk. And is that just what is entailed, or what's that about when we talk about the downtown district?
yeah, so it's a bunch of the roads in the downtown. So it'd be West Mall, East Mall, Palma, between Traffic Way and East Mall. Also be Lewis from the bridge to Traffic Way, be Traffic Way from El Camino out to the entrance to the community center. West Mall, the other part of West Mall by the junior high that didn't get done by the junior high, taking care of that. Just a lot of the downtown streets, but it would also include anytime we do, significant work on a street, we need to also upgrade the ADA ramps that are out of compliance. So it would also include tackling a lot of that work as well.
And
Sounds
just
like
to
they'll take care of most of the streets down then, huh?
Mm-hmm. Oh, and it also includes that alleyway behind Sylvester's that goes from El Camino to Palma Avenue. The one like behind.
Is that a public?
It is.
Right, you can take it all the way from Sherwin-Williams to Palma or vice versa. That's a public act right away or whatever?
It is.
Okay. Know that.
And just a reminder,
Didn't know
all
that.
of these projects were carried forward from the previous budget's 5-year CIP, and they're just moving forward.
One question,
Carried forward, in other words, they were in the out years in that budget and they're moving
Yeah.
into the budget years.
Yeah,
Okay, got it.
we did
Good point.
separate out that traffic way parking because that one feels like that's more, we need to address that sooner rather than later.
Okay.
question on this San Marcos Road. What part of San Marcos is that?
So that one's actually almost ready to go out for bid, and that's a combined project with the St. Gabriel Road rehab above. So St. Gabriel Road, well, San Marcos is between Portola and St. Gabriel. And then the St. Gabriel section is from San Marcos to Highway 41. So those are going to be some pretty significant improvements on some of the busier roads out that way. So that's actually packaged as one project.
Okay. Is there any hope of that ever getting that San Marcos Road extending so you can get to 3F Meadows without jogging around 5 miles out of your way or something?
I'm trying to think where that might be.
No,
Well,
I think
if you
Jerry,
turn
the answer to
off
that's
of,
no.
if you turn off of San Gabriel, I think,
Onto Monita.
Yeah, Monita, you have to go to Monita.
Where San Marcos kind of sort of turns into San Gabriel, you have the stop sign there. Then it jogs to the left about 100 feet on San Gabriel, and then you see a sign that says San Marcos. There's either a water company or a city pump station there. I think it's a water company.
Booster
facility.
pump. It's a water booster pump.
Yeah, and then San Marcos Road goes up there 100 feet or so and stops, and obviously picks up again in 3F Meadows. But my understanding is, because my old boss lives a couple lots down on San Gabriel, that some of those property owners were offered by Wells Fargo or whoever, remember who owned our roads, to buy back those right-of-ways, on their backyards. And so my understanding is, that road's never going through. Is that a correct understanding?
I don't know if I'd ever say never, but it's probably unlikely.
Yeah. Well, it's just an aggravation that's been there for 20 years or more.
The other weird part about that is it doesn't really line up with San Marcos. It's offset from the intersection, so it becomes a little goofy to be so close to that T intersection of San Gabriel and San Marcos that goes to Portola.
Yeah,
but,
I think it's one of E.G. Lewis's paper roads that is not going to become a reality, for a whole bunch of reasons. Yeah.
There have been the fire access issues into that area, of course, are serious. They're real, and nobody died to my knowledge so far, but one of these days.
I have a better shot of punching through Carmelita, maybe.
Okay, so I got to ask one that may be in the possibility. On San Gabriel Road, you say it's Highway 41 to San Marcos. Are you going to fix that tree root just past San Marcos?
You mean north of San Marcos?
Yeah, just barely.
So the answer to that question, Rochelle, is yes, it will be fixed, but by city crews or somebody else, because it's actually off this section of San Gabriel. But that is one that we could really do easy with a skid steer and a rent-a road.
Yeah. Nick's still doing a budget pitch for a skid steer.
Well, Rochelle, I assume unless there's a car coming, you just veer around that thing, right?
Yeah, that's it. I do.
Yeah.
No, I hate that one. There's a couple. There's another one on Santa Cruz up there, and some over by off El Camino and whatnot. But that one we really need to get.
Well, I'm sure Jerry Rangel is probably wondering when you're going to get to San Ramon.
Yeah,
because San Ramon's pretty bad. I take it when I go to Home Depot, take the back way, and that's pretty bumpy.
It's very rough.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So, all right, Mark, do you have any questions on any of these projects? Because I think we can skip them. They're relatively self-explanatory. We don't need to go into detail on each one.
Yeah. And again, they are kind of described a little bit more in the narrative, and all of those roads that Nick talked about in the downtown district are in the narrative as well. So if we're ready, we can move on to the Street Maintenance Assessment District Fund on page C17.
Sounds good.
So this is a fund, I think there's probably 8 maybe small districts in this that pay in small amounts each year to the district for maintenance. So the amounts are so small, it's hard to really gather them to do a project. So they've kind of been, they'll grow over time until we have enough money to really do some patching or something like that, and then they have to build up again. So we are looking at doing a little something in there, probably a little design in the first year, and then some construction in the second year. So if we move to the next page.
Wait, Jerry, before you do that, what are the negative 20,000 and negative 75,000 for expenses?
So that would be the project coming through. So this is just the fund analysis. So you'll see the revenues at the top, and then the expenses come through as negatives because they're minusing out of the budget.
Okay, because of the fund analysis, it's affecting balance.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So you'll see that it's 2,100 a year, basically. So very small amounts for across these, 8 or so districts.
Okay.
I have a quick question because I'm trying to understand these spreadsheets. The ending balance, I mean, it went way down from 84 to 33 and then back up to 88 without any money being spent. So I'm just a little unclear on how this is laid out, the structure of this spreadsheet.
Right, so you'll see out of the 6 columns there, the first 2 on the left, the 1819 and 1920, are the actual activity that occurred you'll see those in our financial statements. That 2021 column is budgeted. So that's what we thought we were gonna do 2 years ago at this time when we were looking forward 2 years. So we didn't actually meet that. So we thought we would spend some other project money during that time, which we didn't spend. So we're kind of carrying the balance forward from the 1920 at the bottom where you see the 84,889. That then moves into the beginning balance for 2021.
Okay.
So yeah, it kind of hops over that budget column.
What I don't,
I gotta read the heading on those things because it makes sense now.
Okay.
what I don't
Perfect.
follow though, and because Mark had a good question there, is in the, if the ending available balance actual at the end of 1920 was almost $85,000. We budgeted in 2021 that we thought it would go down to 33,000. How come there isn't expenses in the budgeted column? In other words, that we thought we were going to spend money in the budgeted column, but then, in the updated estimate, it's not there. How come it's not in the budgeted column? How did it get down to 33,000 if there's not an expense item in the budget column?
It would have been in the 1920 budget column, which we don't show here. So we did a 2-year budget like we're doing this year, and it was in the first year of the budget.
Okay.
This one only shows the second year. So you see that
Okay.
the beginning balance is 31. So we'd already taken it out by that
Okay.
time.
Got it. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, we had planned to do a $50,000 project in the last budget cycle, or the one we're ending. And we didn't have an ability to kind of pull the trigger on that because it's going to be, Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, but each of these, there's like how many assessment districts in
I
this?
think there's about 8.
And each 8 of them have their own balance of funds. And then we have to spend that amount of money in each of those districts. So it's kind of a lot of fine tuning and just, it's going to probably be a project of a lot of dig outs and pave backs and things like that.
And this is something I wanted to point out to Mark, because we've had this discussion, 2 years ago and 4 years ago. As we have these different little districts around the community, and they're contributing these very small amounts of money, that don't accumulate enough to do something with, but you got to keep track of it separately. It's a lot of work for Jerry and her crew, and then for Nick and his crew, because then you got to figure out, well, what can we do in this small area with $5,000 that's been accumulated in the last, X years, or $15,000, whatever. And so we had talked in the last 2 budget cycles about, what can we do to eliminate these funds? Because, they got to generate the same amount of pages for this in the budget as they did for, some of the much larger funds. And I don't know that we got an answer to, how hard it is to get rid of these little districts. It would, in my mind, almost be worth going to these districts and saying, we'll do, $10,000 or $20,000 extra in your project area if you agree to shut down this, so we can just do away with this little district and get rid of them all, because they're not an effective way of collecting enough money to do effective amounts of maintenance with, when you consider the amount of time and effort that goes into it from the finance staff and the public works staff. I don't know. Have we learned anything about getting rid of these things?
We did. We brought an item to council back when I was finance director, and surprisingly, these groups came out in force. wanting to keep them. Honestly, we collect, I think, somewhere between $200 to $300 for most of these areas. And if we actually charge them the admin it takes to do that, which we don't, the finance admin's more than we bring in on it. But they felt that it was very important that the city continue and that they continue paying the $10, even though we told them that we couldn't do anything with it. And the council said, nope, let's not do that.
I think
we can
a couple
revisit
things
that staff
about that. One
report.
is, yeah. Because the other thing, you're talking about $200 per district, not $200 per property, which
Yeah.
$200
no,
a
we're
property
talking
would be real money.
$20 per property.
Yeah. And we keep talking about, essentialism, which to me is just another word for efficiency in this regard. And that is, this is not an efficient way to run a city. And in that regard, I think, I hate to say, I don't want to have to spend 100 hours figuring out how to get rid of them to save, 20 hours a year or whatever, even over time, it would be worth it. But if we could figure out how to do it with a staff report, come forward to the council and we do it, I think the council would be open to the idea of, hey, we're all about trying to be efficient, and getting rid of extraneous things is efficient. So it's something I'd like to see us consider myself, because it pains me to see Jerry have to go through all it and her staff have to go through this every 2 years and track it, and Nick to have to come up with, how can I spend $10,000 on these 3 blocks over and get anything done over in these, little neighborhood over here.
Well, keep in mind too, if somebody calls and complains about a pothole and then a maintenance worker goes out there to throw some cold mix in the pothole, we have to document all that and then charge it to these accounts and everything. So it becomes kind of a pain to deal with them. So we would love, I think.
Are some of these on otherwise non-city maintained roads?
They're non-city maintained roads.
Yeah.
But they have this funding that we can spend on them.
Well, and I've heard, I've seen people complain in emails that, well, we're not a city maintained road, but we pay an extra fee and then the city still won't fix our road, and so they're thinking in terms of, they're paying an extra $10 or $20 a year. And it's like, why isn't the city fixed my road?
Well, the other thing you can see on this,
and we've got to be realistic here.
The 22-23 ending available balance of $320. The idea is to burn this down to kind of nothing if we can, and then hopefully
burning it down nothing. Yeah, burning it down to nothing doesn't help unless we get rid of the fund.
Right.
Because then we'll just be building it up for 10 or 15 years, and Jerry will have to keep track of it all, and then until we get enough for you to do something with it again. So
well, and for clarification, what Nick was saying is if we do send somebody out to make these small repairs, it has to get billed to something. Without this with the street maintenance assessment district fund, this particular spreadsheet right here, how does it get tracked?
How does the staff time get tracked, or
the cost of the work?
So Nick and his team would track it through a system that we have to track all of their staff time and the materials that they use and everything, and then they let finance know, and then finance charges it against the district.
But if this particular, I think if I understand what Charles was saying, is because these are such small numbers, and to remove this district from the accounting, is that what you were saying, Charles?
Yeah, if you got rid of these little districts, you could then spend all the money and get rid of these funds.
But when work is done and it needs to get charged to a line item somewhere, for lack of a better term, what do you charge it to? What pot of money would you say the funds are going to come out of? Because this is specific.
Well, we would no longer go out and fill that pothole on a non-city maintained street.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, because we'd be more effective for the neighbors to get together and have somebody to not slurry seal, but do something. because it's not cheaper for them in the long run, because, you know, if the city comes out and fills their pothole, it's probably $150 for a pothole. And then they're not, you know, they're not getting big bang for their
Yeah.
buck. And it's hugely ineffective and inefficient for us. And we're not even charging for Jerry's time, right?
Right.
Mm.
Well, Charles, we have talked about this in every budget meeting that I've been in since now it's my third cycle, I think. Anyway, and the thing I would be worried about a little bit is if you do away with these, what about the ones that are a little more significant, like the Apple Valley or the San Juan Bautista? I forget the other ones, where they're always complaining, we're paying and we never get anything. It's a ripoff. How come you let these people have a break and you didn't give us a break? I guess that's the downside for it.
They're very different though, Jerry, in the sense of size and scope. I mean, those are big enough. They're cost effective, maybe not the most cost.
Yeah, but my recollection was
cost effective because they have critical mass.
When we talked about it before, my recollection was you had to go through some massive hearing process and legal notices and everything to do away with one of these districts, and it wasn't worth the time to do away with a district. That was the argument that I recall.
It's not a simple process, but I do think we do need to do away with this district at some point. I mean, collecting $10 and having these people think that we'll maintain their roads. I also think we go out and we fill a lot of these potholes without charging our time, because as you see, there's zero expenses for a number of years. But yeah, I think it's something we need to continue to look at, and we can see if we can move it forward.
Maybe
we can actually spend it, it'd be good.
I mean, maybe the council could just set the charge at zero. You're not eliminating the district. The council could bring it to life again at some point if they want to and if they wanted to really do something with it, go back to those property owners and say, well, we really need $500 a year. I don't know, something like that might work.
Yeah. Well, or you say, if they fight you, because I believe there was some issue where they could protest enough, we could always say, okay, we'll start charging admin staff time, which then takes up between the assessor and finance more than that brings in. So there are options.
I once had a bank account that I had just left open with $150 in it one time. And I didn't even look at it, and I found out they decided the bank was charging me $5 a month, and it was down to almost nothing. So
there we go.
You know, I should have closed it a long time ago. So there is a real business would not do what the city's doing, but
yeah. That's correct.
It is.
I would have to caution myself about that politically. I'd be fully ready to withstand any neighbors. Oh, we got to have our fund. And it's kind of ironic. You know, you have people protesting increased fees or whatever, but you could literally have people protesting saying, charge me. I want to be charged. But what it could do politically is elevate the entire issue of non-city maintained roads, of, you know, creating a discussion of, you know, because I've had multiple people hit me up about, we pay the same F-14 taxes, yada, 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 yada. We pay the same gas taxes, whatever, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And that doesn't seem fair that other residents of the city get their roads maintained. It could elevate that kind of discussion about non-city maintained roads. But otherwise, I would really like to see us get rid of these kinds of things. And I think, you know, there's a kind of a cost analysis of how much time would it take to get rid of them? How much time would you save?
I would agree.
You know, in not having them around. So, but I mean, as far as the budget and approving the expenditure, I don't have a problem with that. I just would like to see us I'll look at whether it would be worthwhile getting rid of them. Okay. I think we can move on then to the
Okay.
next stuff.
This is just the revenues and expense that we just discussed, so we can move right on. So this is the circulation impact fee. So this fund has the like the Del Rio interchange and the Santa Barbara interchange, some of those particular impacts, and other generalized circulation impact revenue would flow through this account. So if we can go to the next page. So these are estimated revenues for the impact fees, which are based on development. And I think as we talked about last week, or as you all talked about last week, the budgeted number was a little higher than we actually were able to come in at. We were expecting a lot of projects to come through. There's a lot in the pipeline right now. And I'm expecting at some point they're going to go ahead and come through, and we'll see those in our revenues. But it doesn't look like we're seeing them this year, and kind of we're a little bit conservative for the next couple of years, but we do expect some other additional revenue to come through. You do see that the USHA funds for the downtown infrastructure enhancement that we talked about on kind of the stuff that we're doing right now currently to get ready for that 650,000 piece, and then some interest earnings. Are there any questions on that piece?
Yeah, Jerry, on C18, back a few there, under expenses, we show for this budget cycle $1.5 million a year. You know, a very round figure. What projects is that related to? I mean, I might have already seen it, or it might be listed on subsequent pages, but I'm curious what that's about. And then down in the ending available balance, we have an asterisk, and then we have, so let's see, I think I'll go back another there. Then we have these available deferred revenue balances. So these indicate that we have, specific fees for these. I don't know if we have a specific fee area, or we've taken fee amounts and then put them into these separate pots. But I noticed that the Del Rio interchange 150,000, since that was always kind of our hot thing, and we were prepared to spend millions of dollars on it. It has a very low balance, whereas Santa Barbara interchange has a a significant balance. I'll say, not enough to do a project, but a significant balance.
So these are in addition to the base circulation fees for specific projects in these areas. So as you know, Del Rio is not fully developed yet. So we haven't received all of the revenues for that. We do see it going down to zero because I'm assuming that we're using it that 1.5 in each of the 2 fiscal years that we're budgeting is for the Del Rio interchange projects. And Nick could probably talk about a little bit more about what that is used for, but I'm assuming that we're using some of that deferred revenue against that project as well.
And also, well, Nick, before you get to that, 2 of the pots, well, let me back up this because this might be a Jerry question first. So Jerry, I forget the term you just used, but like a supplemental fee or something. In other words, you have a base fee. And is that to say that if you develop somewhere in the El Camino, Viejo Camino area, you're paying an extra fee to support, amongst other projects, in El Camino Real, Viejo Camino Signal?
Rochelle, can you hop in a little bit on this history?
Yeah,
It might be more a Phil type question, so Rochelle might be able to.
and I apologize. I was also looking at something, but yes, there are certain projects that are conditioned to contribute towards a larger project. So we knew that with Eagle Ranch and Dove Creek and all of those, they were certainly very different than our general plan. And we would have to do a project there at Highway 101 and the Santa Barbara interchange. And so as Dove Creek, when Las Lomas were built out, they had to contribute a set amount that was set forth in their general plan amendment and conditions of approval to pay an extra fee to eventually do what I would call an interim improvement to that area. So it's not the final long range, but they had enough traffic that, okay, eventually we're going to have to do a signal. Now that we don't do that anymore, or I fight really hard against that, and having developers pay towards a future improvement instead of just having them do the improvement, because I think the total fee cost that they're splitting out was $250,000, and we're just never going to even come close to doing what we need to do there. I think that was enough for 2 signals at the time, and now it's not even close to 1 signal. So we kind of have these amounts in here that carry forward. It's a fund balance. Those aren't annual numbers that are a problem. I guess we have 891 for the Santa Barbara. That's the closest, but it's still not
isn't
close
that
enough to
reflective
do
of?
it. Yeah.
That's kind of reflective of in general. I mean, you establish a fee schedule based on estimated cost of projects at a time.
Yep.
And then by the time 10 years later, somebody comes along and builds something in that area and they're paying their share of $150,000 traffic signal that would now cost $400,000 to put in or
Yeah,
something.
that's it.
But now what I'm wondering about, what struck me on this is 2 questions. So you mentioned like Las Lomas, Dove Creek, there's, I forget the name of it, but the project that was involved, the general plan amendment down on Halcon, those newer houses that have just been built on the corner of Viejo Camino and Santa Barbara and
Right.
Halcon, did they pay into these things? And if I was one of those neighboring just people who had 5 acres, it's now been rezoned, and I split my property into 3 pieces or something, and I build individual homes, am I paying into that?
I would have to look at the project, the individual project, but that is the idea, yes.
Rochelle, I think that's Sarah Robles. That's a Dennis Mareshko development that you're referring to, Charles. And they I think did pay into that Santa Barbara, and it changed like $25,000 a home or something like that.
Would they also be paying for like these signals that are identified? Or let's say, Dove Creek that's being discussed as we speak at DRC, commercial project, if the mini storage project were approved, would those kind of projects, general plan amendment or not, would they have to pay for these signals in theory?
I don't believe if there's not necessarily a general plan or conditional use or something like that, that they don't have to, but there is a map of the area where these fees exist. So
Okay.
I think I can get you more. We'll get with Phil.
So there's an applicable fee area
Yeah.
kind of thing. And I
Yes.
guess the only one of these that sort of surprised me is I didn't know we even had under consideration as a signal at San Diego and El Camino. I guess it makes sense that we do. If you get enough traffic there, you might need it, but that's good to know. But the money we're talking about, well, that's available balance, not expenditures. So, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
So if we want to hop down maybe to the expenditure page. So this is the beginning of the work on the Del Rio interchange area, which includes the rerouting of Ramona and some work at Del Rio and ECR, I believe. Nick, is that right?
Yes.
So I believe that project will probably cost more than we're estimating here in the 3 million. I think we have some additional money in the out years if I'm.
So I saw that, and I saw you have 4 million in the out years, and that funding we're expecting to come from.
Where are you seeing the out years beyond the budget?
Oh, I
Where are you
looked at
seeing the out years?
the out years are in that 5-year capital improvement plan in the beginning.
G17.
G17. So it's so that matrix with all the thing. There's a 5-year capital improvement plan. There we go.
Second line.
Okay.
Okay, okay, gotcha.
And so are those, is that 4 million, are we expecting that from special fees or?
Yes, primarily.
So the budget years, the 1.5 million, is that for the Ramona? I'm sorry, yeah, the Ramona stuff, or what's that for?
That would, for the 21, 22.
Yeah, and the 22, 23, the 1.5 million each year.
Yeah, so that would be, right now, it would be the 21, 22 would try to bring that project to shovel ready with the alternative improvements, you know, the right turn westbound and northbound and the traffic signal improvements and realignment and of Ramona and all that. And then also Clint Pierce on the northwest corner of El Camino in Del Rio is he's got a Taco Bell project that he's doing there, and to widen the road from the westbound to northbound Del Rio to northbound 101, that widening is going to really impact that drive-through. So he is willing to build a portion of those required improvements to widen Del Rio, but it's not a condition of his project. So we are working on a reimbursement agreement, if you will, to reimburse him some of those costs that he's going to incur to construct part of the city's project. And then it would also, the other portion would be for to pay consultants like Wallace to bring the project to become shovel ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
And I was telling Jerry, I had a good meeting with Wallace yesterday on this project, and there's some advantages to we're trying to get through the Caltrans process as painlessly as possible, and particularly the environmental process. So we may change the name of this project to something like the Del Rio Road Operational and Multimodal Improvements at US 101.
Well, I hope there's a good bureaucratic reason for that, because
there is. It's called NEPA and CEQA easiness.
Okay. Oh, it's easier if you call it that. You can call it whatever you.
And it sounds like it might be. Sounds like a better.
I don't like using big words and acronyms. The hell of it.
What it's kind of implying is that we're just tweaking the improvements there, and we're not making a big deal over it. So.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Call it like the Del Rio Minor Adjustment Project.
They're not so much interchange improvements anymore, to be honest, with the roundabout. So the name probably needs to be modified some to better reflect the project.
Got it. Okay. Well, hey, we might be ready to move on to storm drainage.
Terrific.
Yeah.
So this is another impact fee fund for the storm drain projects. So if we go down, let's hop down to expenses actually real quick. So this is probably what you were talking about earlier, Mark, and kind of some of the past storm drain work that we'd done. So you see some in there. We did have some projects that we had, those 2017 storm that caused so much damage, and we had a number of different projects. We did apply for FEMA funding for all of those, and we got 10 cents or something, really minor amounts for those. But we did get some insurance reimbursement for some of the cost for those damaged culverts back from that 17 storm. And we do have some other improvements here. So this is the one that Rochelle was talking about. We do the expansion when we replace it. We are expanding the capacities of these when we do that. But the line items 9 and 10 that you see there from the impact fee study, they are, kind of not unending projects, so we felt that it was better to move future adjustments into the LTF fund.
Barry, I'm confused. My page G27 has Joy Playground, La Plaza Park, and pickleball courts on it. And is Fund 287, but it says G27 on it, and your G27 on the screen is different.
So we may have two G27s. It's hard to do page numbers when we have them kind of broken up like this. So we didn't clean up the page numbers for this process. So I do apologize for that. You probably have a second G27 page a couple of pages earlier.
Yeah, there are two. Yeah,
My
in the
apologies
packet,
for
this
that.
is page 32.
I'm not seeing the,
Go back a couple of pages.
I
I'm
may
not seeing
have,
the page you have on the screen. I'm not physically.
I may
seeing-
have yours, Charles, because I have two in my packet.
Okay,
Oh,
got
sorry.
it. Okay.
I
That's
have
all right.
two G27s on mine as well.
Yeah, no, I do not. I go from G26 to G27 and then on to something else. I do have a question for you. You kind of skipped over on C19.
Yes.
You have revenues, permits and fees, 36,000, 35,000, 36,000. And it looks like, okay, 18, 19, 34,000, 19, 20, 46,000. We budgeted some more in 2021, but it just doesn't sound like a lot of money annually.
Right.
Considering we were talking about earlier about 150,000 a year for storm drainage.
Right,
like
and this
stuff.
is considered for expansion, and we are undergoing the impact fee study currently. So we are going in the process of updating all of the fees that will come to council for approval at, as soon as we can get that work done. So those amounts may change. And of course, the 2021 amount was higher given the fact that we were expecting all of the activity to kind of come through the process by that time. But we are expecting some more activity. As you know, there's quite a lot of development out there.
Right, okay.
But
It's
it's
just,
not a
yeah,
lot per year.
right, yeah, that just doesn't sound like a lot of money per year
Right,
for capacity improvements, et cetera.
right.
And the good thing is, for the most part,
Okay, cool.
there's not a lot of flooding issues in town, Charles. So, we do have a lot of this stuff covered after that Amapola project. And then also the stormwater regulations now is that, if you did a big project, like Del Rio Ranch, let's say on the former Walmart site, they need to ensure that, their post-development flow from the site doesn't surpass their pre-development flow. So a lot of these projects actually are, the new development kind of handles their own stormwater nowadays on site.
Right, good point. That's a good point. I guess in our community, because of the topography, stormwater wise, we don't so much have flooding except potentially in Amapola and those low-lying areas, but we have potential for, washouts and, because of, either plugged storm drains or insufficient capacity or whatever. Okay, all righty. What else on that? Are we ready for Parkland?
Right, I think that's about it on storm drain. Parkland, again, this is another impact fee fund for park facilities and acquisitions, that sort of thing. So revenues, again, that top line is the kind of the ongoing revenue source from development. And again, it was a little high in 2021 budgeted, but we do expect some revenue to be coming in. We want to pop down one item. Oh, there we go. If you want to talk about the expense piece on it. So there are a couple of projects that we have ongoing here. So the pipeline that goes from Atascadero Creek to the lake, that is part of the projects that are defined in the impact fee study. So expanding that capacity of water to get there and doing some minor improvements to the repair line to expand its capacity. We did have the Joy Playground that came through here, so some contributions there. La Plaza Park project, of course, that should be finishing up this fiscal year. And then the $150,000 that council has allocated toward the pickleball courts at Colony Park. So some of that we're going to include a request with the budget document to move a little bit of that funding to the current year to pay for some preliminary work on that. Is there any questions on this section?
We don't have any further identified projects at this time, right? That would be chargeable to that fund?
Correct.
Got it. Okay, I think if no questions, we'll proceed to the next one.
Okay. So the next one is the 2010 Bond Proceeds Master Agreement Fund. So I think you talked about last week the bonds that were issued for the redevelopment agencies to use for City Hall, and identified in the bond documents were a number of other projects if we had money left over after the City Hall project was complete. So that includes wayfinding signs, the maiden statue in the Sunken Gardens, and something at the Centennial Plaza area. So we did purchase those East Mall properties out of that Centennial Bridge kind of budget that we had. We split some of that out. We do have some additional funding for the Centennial Bridge and Plaza project. So that is kind of that area where that yellow house sits across from City Hall. Certainly there's an interest to do something cool there. What is the best, highest use of something cool? That's to kind of be determined still, but we do have a little bit of funds there that we are anticipating being able to use between the end of this year and next year to do that something cool. So it's not a ton, but it is something there, and we should be able to make some progress depending on.
I don't see the line items that says something cool. So question on this. So essentially what we're doing is, from a budgetary standpoint, is we're reflecting that we're going to spend the remaining available balance, which includes investment earnings of $2,790, but I guess that's just like 1%, our imputed rate of return or whatever.
Correct.
And so if we do that, if we're successful in, coming up with something cool, spending the money, at the end of this budget cycle, the fund balance would be zero. Would the fund essentially be closed as far as, future expenditures, it would be closed, right? But obviously,
right. There's no more future revenues or expenses.
We're still paying off the bonds for the next
right.
years.
And that's in a different fund. So this is kind of the project money.
And is there ever, I would gather the answer is no, but has there been a time limit on expenditures? Because obviously these bonds were, sold in 2010, and we're in 2021, essentially still talking about how to spend bond proceeds. There was no time limit as to spending it?
I'm not aware of that. I believe it's just as long as we spend them on the items that were identified in the bond.
Okay. Cool. Okay.
Right. So this will close us out. So just a little bit on the maiden statue, just repairing or doing something with the base, right, Nick? Fixing it, making it prettier or something.
Yeah, so right now it's just a cast in place concrete base underneath that maiden statue. So we want to dress it up a little bit. And there's a couple ideas being thrown out there a little bit. That was perfect, wasn't it, Jerry? Dress it up, dress her up a little bit.
Couldn't help it.
Well, she is.
Sorry, I don't
mean clothing, I guess, or something.
I wish I was that clever.
Now, what about the? Yeah, it went right over my head, so I'm sorry. The downtown parking wayfinding signage, you know, recently, I was downtown pruning a tree, Nick, and talked to Kevin Campion, and he was saying, "You see what happened?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Well, somebody ran over our wayfinding sign." So one of the signs that you know, lists the businesses and all that, I guess what that would be on the corner of Traffic and
Palma.
was knocked down, and I guess your guys had to come out and, you know, cut it down to the ground, that sort of thing. Is this to repair, maintain, replace those kind of things, or is this for a larger new downtown parking wayfinding signage thing?
So this would be kind of to have that wayfinding signage for directing people to public parking areas primarily. So, you know, you see it in the other cities, they got the P with the circle around it. And I think it's white on blue with some arrows and stuff. It'd be that, or replacing some of the other green, you've seen these other green signs around downtown. You know, those decorative signs. It could be part of that too. So.
And,
Okay.
yeah, never mind.
What else did I miss, Rochelle?
No, there is some of our wayfinding, which is why it was originally in the bond, which are those big monument signs as you get off 41. Some of those need to be replaced too. So not the whole sign, just some parts of it. So.
Over by the
Yeah,
Vons.
fading and that sort
Yeah.
of thing. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the Vons Shopping Center entrance there to the left of that as you get off the freeway, some of those signs.
Okay. All righty then. Any other questions, or then otherwise we can move on to Colony Park.
So this is the fund that we use for the construction of Colony Park. So we did receive some donations over time for just miscellaneous kind of donations toward construction and equipment type stuff. So we have a little bit of money in a deferred revenue account. So it came in as donations and it's been waiting to be spent. So we did spend some of that last year, I think, on some drinking fountains and some other things like that. So this is just the remaining $4,300 of that money and a little bit of some interest that's been earned over time on that, and then closing this fund out. So we'll be purchasing some equipment for the Colony Park Community Center.
And that would, it sounds good to close out the account. I mean, if somebody donated money in the future for something, for some purpose, it would just run it through, the general fund or something.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So in other words, if I donated money to repair to add a new drinking fountain or something, you wouldn't start up this fund again.
Right, exactly. So we had that whole program with the fundraising and everything for
It'd be
that.
closed.
So, right, exactly.
Good. Okay, cool. It was good to close.
You know, I
things out.
want to touch on that, Charles. That's a good question. When somebody donates money for specific use, if it's not, how would they be guaranteed that it's going to be spent on that if it doesn't go in? I mean, I realize this is kind of ridiculous to keep a fund like this for such a small amount, but I also feel if somebody's going to donate for a specific use, they should be assured that it's going to be used that way.
Absolutely, they should. And we track those. So we have a lot of different systems in place and account numbers and stuff to track. And we have quite a long list of things. I think we have electronic billboard or something. Maybe we have $30 in from 10 years ago. I'm not even sure what that's for, but it's in there and we haven't spent it for anything else because it's for electronic billboards. So some of these things we do need to do a little research on, I think, and clean up. But certainly, like you say, any money that's donated for a specific purpose is only used for that purpose.
Okay.
But Mark, it's easier to, as long as you have enough, institutional knowledge that rolls forward, it's easy to say, 10 people donated money for park benches or something, and you have that on a spreadsheet somewhere. That's easier than establishing a separate fund in the accounting system that these pages represent. Because when you establish a separate fund, you got to go through, you know, all keeping track enough to develop these kind of pages, as opposed to, yeah, hey, 5 people donated money for park benches, and we got enough money to go buy a park bench now.
Right.
You know, this having a whole separate fund in the system is more of a pain.
Right. No, I understand. I mean, I understand that, especially, I mean, as from my treasury experience, which is by no means anywhere in comparison to this, but as a 501c3, when money comes into us through Kiwanis and I have to track it, they say that this is donated specifically for a scholarship or specifically for this. I need to make sure that that money is in there, and I need to know when it's spent and that it's going to exactly what we say it's for, and not accidentally melted into some other pot and then forgotten about. So that was just my concern. But if you have a tracking system, then that's fine. I'm totally good with that.
You're right. It's a good point, though. And thank you for bringing that up.
Cool. Okay, so we're ready to talk project funds, and I'm noting it is 4:58, so we'll need to move towards conclusion here.
Okay, so the projects for F14 are our last little category here. So this is in section F of the budget. It has its own little tiny section. So the first couple pages are really descriptions of the projects, the segments, the length, width, everything that you would want to know about that, the expected treatment, and certainly that expected treatment may change as Public Works and their teams of folks go out and kind of do some preliminary work. Sometimes they find that conditions in the field aren't quite as what they had anticipated them to be, but they do work pretty hard on getting these kind of categorized. So as you probably recall, we are doing kind of the quadrant section. So you'll see at the top of this page 2024 rehabilitation project. So those are kind of the bigger projects versus the resurfacing project. This is for the East Central and is 2.9 million. So this is kind of a more descriptive, more detailed portion. And then if we go down a little bit, we'll find this is the fund analysis. So even though these are general fund revenues and general fund expenses, we separated out in the budget just for that transparency and clarity, since the council did say they were going to use these for the road work. We want to make sure that everybody can see these and it's transparent for the community as well. So the revenue and the taxation sales tax amounts there, it's 5% or 5 cents or 0.5, half a cent. There we go. That's the word I want. So it's a half a cent versus our Bradley Burns sales tax, which is our regular sales tax that we get as a city, is 1 cent. So this is slightly over half. So generally we're seeing about a 58% of our Bradley Burns tax instead of just the 50%. And that's because of some of the purchases, like if somebody from Atascadero goes to San Luis Obispo and buys a vehicle, San Luis Obispo would get the Bradley Burns 1 cent tax on that, but we would receive the half cent F14 tax on that. So some of these items we are getting taxed, even though we're not getting the Bradley Burns, we are getting the F14. So that would be the same when D20 comes along too. So we're getting slightly more than half of what we get for Bradley Burns for the income piece. Did you have any questions on that revenue side? Nope.
Just to refresh my memory, Jerry, does F14, it expires in 2026, right? Not 2024?
2026, 12
2026.
years. It was done in
Right.
2014.
So because we have numbers out here out to 2025. I guess in the next budget cycle, which would be in 2023, by then we would be, well, to continue F14 type revenue, we would have to have, without
Yes.
interruption, we'd have to have a ballot measure on in 2024, I guess. So in the 2023 to 25 budget cycle, we'd have to consider how you reflect that in your 20, you know, in your out
Yeah.
years, in your out year things. I noticed my road on this list. I hadn't noticed it before. And I do always, you know, we leave to our professional engineering staff to make the judgments on PCI, you know, what's the best time to do this before it falls into a more expensive category. But I think we talked a little bit last time we approved, you know, we had approved the annual contract. We included La Paz and forget San Guillermo, I think, both dead end roads with small numbers of residents on them, which my road is. I mean, it has a few more residents than either of those two, but you know, I'm concerned about us paving dead end roads when we have other more used roads. If we have other more used roads in equally bad shape. In other words, I feel like my road being a dead end road, the only 15, 20 residences will benefit. And we already benefit from the fact that Balboa was paved. You know, that Monterey Road was paved, you know, so that on the way home, we benefit. We're deriving two very nice F14 benefits. We don't need the last half mile, I guess, at least not until every other well-ridden road in town, you know, is given a chance to be fixed. So that's just food for thought because it's not part of.
Well, think San Fernando Road. That's a good one to look at.
Part of San Fernando is non-city maintained, I think. So
It should be city maintained. So that's
We did Jerry Seabox
Yeah.
Road already.
all right, so no, Jerry Seabox on Carmelita, man. So
Jerry Seabock's moving.
oh, is he? Oh, okay. Well, he knows to investigate whether his new home is on a city maintained street or not.
Jerry, are you moving to La Paz Court?
No.
Okay, just checking.
I'd recommend San Guillermo. It's going to be freshly paved. All right. What else do we have, Jerry?
So really the rest of this is
We're
just
officially in overtime.
right, just expenses by year. So it's kind of just to see that fiscal year piece. But again, you see the detail up above this section, and we have the CIP that has the 5-year outlook on that. So this is just additional information. And that about completes what we have for you today. Oh, I did want to ask one thing too. We had last Thursday, we brought the Las Lomas Street Assessment District to you, and we had in there a project for $394,000 for slurry seal in the first year, second year, in the second year. And we'd like to request that we could go ahead and move 20,000 of that budget amount into the first year. So in 21, 22, and then the remainder of the 374 in the second year, so that we can do some design work to prepare for that project. If that would be okay, or we could bring that back to you in a future meeting
absolutely.
as well.
Will that save enough money to do San Fernando?
So you're in trouble, Jerry, because the city maintained portion of San Fernando was done when the year I became city manager.
I remember you fought against that too.
Well, it's like nothing like becoming city manager and then 2 months later your road's paved.
Well, and that's it. As being on the city council, my road, you know, I
Yeah.
feel like somebody's going to go, well, why are they fixing that damn road? That's because this guy lives there.
The problem is that it's been in the budget for the last 2 budget cycles that it was
Ye-
coming now, so everybody's expecting it.
Yeah, to be honest, I hadn't noticed it. I thought it was way out there, like
Yeah,
5 more years or something.
I would really
But
pay
anyway,
attention to those 24, 25, 26 number projects, because those haven't been in the works the whole time, so you don't have a constituency looking for them. So if you see something on those lists that you go, ooh, maybe we shouldn't do that one. I think they're a lot easier to change than the ones that have been in the works for a while.
Yeah, and there's other factors in play because I think it's made sense. I mean, you guys done a great job with the F-14 money. But it has made sense as you over time have realized, well, let's do this whole section of town because it's, you know, it's more efficient from a mobilization standpoint of equipment and that sort of thing. So, you know, I think it started off well and it's gotten better, even in its execution. But I think council's done a great job of just, you know, letting the professional staff come up with the recommendations and standing by them. But you know, their you know, perception sometimes matters. So, in terms of the last item you just brought up, Jerry, moving 20,000 forward, that's important from a budgetary standpoint for us. Of course, yeah, you know, sure, do that. That kind of thing. If we hadn't gotten to that until, you know, if that didn't pop up until August, let's say, would you have to come to council and to move that money forward, or would you have the ability to do that?
So we would need to come to council to move it from a future year to the current year.
Okay, because that's in a separate assessment district is why. In other words,
right. Well, because we had all of the money in the second year of the budget, and so if we wanted to spend any in the first year of the budget, that would require a council action.
Right. It isn't, because I mean, if this was 20,000 of general fund money and you want to move it from this road or move the design forward, that would be no problem because there'd be enough room to do that. But because this is a separate assessment fund and you're showing zero expenditure in a given fiscal year, if you want to change that zero, you need our blessing.
Right.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, one of this was my doing, by the way, so I'll take blame for it. And one of the things is, like, if we don't advance that into that current year, then if this is probably a project we would do in-house, believe it or not, do an in-house design, but I wouldn't be able to have anybody work on it until July 1st. So that becomes kind of pretty tight to do, you know, a surface treatment type project during the hot part of the year.
Yeah, I mean, these kind of things are going to crop up. I mean, it's just, you know, I don't think anybody faults anybody for that happening. This kind of thing happens. I just want to understand the parameters of the approval levels, et cetera. And for Mark to understand why it was important for us to say, yep, you can do that. So, okay, got it.
One more thing too. Jerry and I might work on the narrative a little bit in the impact fee funds, just to make it more closely match the language in the state law, so that it's very clear if we're ever sued again, somebody can't squint at it and go, that doesn't say these exact words. So hopefully that has no effect on the numbers or what we're budgeting or anything like that, just a little bit of the narrative.
Got it. Okay, anything else anybody wants to add for the cause? Because we're 10 minutes over, but that's not too bad.
Real quick, actually, just to piggyback off what Rochelle said a minute ago, it's actually the 25 and 26 years, Rochelle, for those projects.
Yeah.
Because we had the 24 in the last budget cycle.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no 26 on there right
They
now.
pretty much stayed the same.
So I could offer some sad news for Jerry and Rochelle particularly. I've been retired 9 years and they still call me every so often from the county, go, now, what was that fund all about? Now, how is that used?
Okay, I will tell you the electronic billboard fund predates me at the city, and I've been here 24 years, so I have no idea what that $200 is.
I worked for the county when I was
you guys, you know, when I first came to the finance committee, you guys, we were overdue on closing out the Cayuga Separato Sewer Improvement District. And I was city treasurer and we signed the bond proof for those in 87 or 86.
There we go.
I worked for the county when I was very young. I went away for 5 years and came back and I looked, they showed me, here's the things we're working on. We're trying to, I go, Those are the same things we're working on. Haven't you done anything?
All right. Well, with that, those reminiscences, I think we can adjourn our meeting, right? I think that was it. Oh, does anybody have any individual determinations? Nope. All right. Well, then I think we will adjourn our meeting until next Thursday. What's our topic next Thursday, though, Jerry?
We are hoping to focus on wastewater, some of the operations and capital, transit, and some of those other funds.
Okay. Very
And
good. Go ahead.
And I won't be here, but Ryan Betts or Ryan Hayes or some others will be able to answer questions, Jerry, if you need them to attend.
Got it. All right. Very good. Wastewater. That's why I got on city council, so I could talk to it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, everybody. We'll
Thank you,
see you next
everyone.
Thursday. Thank
All
you
right.
all.